Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, your host, and each Sunday we air a program and call the show Community Connection because we want to speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. And our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair coming up next August 2026 at the Rutland Fairgrounds. And had a great fair this year, and we're looking forward to having another one as we get nearer to August. Our guest today is Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and it's been probably, 5 or 6 weeks since we checked in with the mayor. I have 4 topics that I outlined. The first one is budget, and I want to make a little bit of a comment once you get through your local budget issue with the state one, because we are not in great shape at the state level either right now. So I know that the aldermen sent it back. There were some revisions, and now people will be able to vote on town meeting day, correct?
That's right. So the practice I've used for the past few years, Brian, has been to build a budget to operate the city based on what the voters want to see happen, right?
Okay.
So whether that's hefty investments in public safety, investments in roads or infrastructure, whatever it happens to be, we have these conversations throughout the year. We take a look at what we're doing to operate now, and if we want to satisfy the requests that people in the city are making, build a budget around that. I leverage the department heads and their experience and their interactions to do that. So I usually start off with the budget starts pretty big. When it comes to my desk, it's sometimes upwards of 30. Some departments are upwards of 30% increase. So that right there just tells you that the demand for what we need to do and what we're actually capable of doing is there's a big gap.
There's a gap.
And there always is, and we'll talk about that on the state side too, I'm sure. Rutland we don't run any social services or any social service programs at all. We don't have any of them. So, we have our departments all focus on needed items. So this year, we presented about a 12% increase after I had whittled it down, meeting with my department head. So, there are a couple of departments that wanted to add 2 people. Well, maybe we're going to only add 1. The PD wanted to staff to 39 officers. Well, maybe we're only going to staff to 38, right? So that's what happens through my process. And on November 1st, I deliver that budget to the board. The board has till the end of December to cut. They can only cut from the city budget. They don't have the ability to add. And this year, there were differing priorities. I think the nicest way to say it is each set of aldermen had a set of different priorities. Some of them just wanted it to come in at 3%. Some of them wanted it to come in at 6%. Some wanted to make sure that they fully funded rec and DPW, but cut other departments. So they couldn't quite get there through their process. And while I could have said, you're going to send it back to me, I won't make any changes, send it right back to you, I had that ability. It was a little bit better for us to make what I would say more surgical trimmings than blunt force trimmings. So us in City Hall, in our departments, we work on this stuff every single day. We're in there. We know where we can make cuts and where we can make changes if we're being held to a standard or a number or area. With those cuts and changes always comes a reduction in services. At this point, when the board sent the budget back to me, that was with no real additional services in it, right? So it's going to be a reduction in services now. So we wanted to be thoughtful about it. So rather than fighting the board, the night we were supposed to decide on it, I heard they wanted to send it back, and I said, look, instead of staying here for 3 hours, going through this, and then still not having the budget that you want, send it back to me now, and I'll take the next 2 weeks, and it was really only like 9 days, and work through this and start to make some trimmings where I think we can find some. So that's what we did, and we got, and I'll go over some of those in a second, but we got to about 6.4%. And what we did on Tuesday night last week, so a couple weeks ago is we just went through all of that with the board, and it was a very, very fast meeting because I had kept in the majority of the cuts that they wanted, and we had cut out parts of the budget that we had discussed and that I think really fit the bill. So, any questions on that so far? I know there's a lot, but
no, I get what the process is, and I guess it'll be interesting to see what the vote is.
Right.
And when you combine the municipal side of the budget with what could possibly be a lot of increase in the property taxes on the education side, I don't know how it's going to go.
And this is the big thing, I was talking to Alderman Coopely about this, and one of the things he said that was so interesting is, he while he appreciates the city doing good work to get the budget to 6%, and he knows that most of that is already built-in costs, right? Mm-hmm. Our insurance went up 8%. We had 2 union contracts that were negotiated, and just the cost of goods has gone up. Most of our budgets this year were really on the people side. Mm-hmm. The increases. So things that we don't have in our control unless we're going to start trimming people, but then you start trimming services again. So Alderman Coopely, his point was, while we're probably in a good place in the city, to look at that state side, the other half of the bill, going to be going up 12%, it's really hard to stomach. And it is for us too. The city has, at least for the past 25, 30 years, really been the balance on the tax bill. As the state has continually and consistently increased, the city side has cut. And while, the city of Rutland, if this budget gets approved in March, would be running $27 million to run the city of, 16,000 people. If you look at the schools, and Rutland is an example, their budget, when you include the federal subsidies and all the other components, their budget's $60 million to serve 1,800 students. And it is a vast difference between the two. But that's the problem all across the state.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. So.
The December 1st letter from the tax commissioner indicated an 11.9% potential property tax increase. Now, some municipalities won't see that. They might see 5%. Some will see more than that. I don't know where Rutland City is going to end up, but I know for the most part in Rutland County, school boards have done a very good job in being fiscally responsible and not putting forth a lot of increases. So we'll have to see what happens. And, of course, you've got then the added proviso that has been suggested by the governor that we spend, I think he's talking about $78 million of one-time funds, again, to buy it down. And if we did that, we could probably get it down to about 4.5%. And I understand from what I'm hearing, there's a House member in Barrie that is going to propose a bill that will freeze spending for 3 years for schools. If there's an increase and they want to do more, it's got to come out of the general fund. It cannot come out of property taxes. And I believe that the Senate Pro Tem, Senator Baruth, is going to propose 1 year of freezing, or maybe not freezing, but put a cap on it. And I don't know what that number is going to be.
Level funding from the previous year.
Yeah, I don't know what that's going to be. So there's potential for some other things to happen, but it's going to be a very interesting year. By the time you folks hear this show, I will have been up in Montpelier for a week. The State of the State address is Wednesday, this past Wednesday, with the governor, and I'm pretty sure I have a pretty good idea of what he's going to say. And the number one issue will be education reform. The task force, in his view and in many others' views, did not do what they were supposed to do with the 3 maps that they did not come up with. So he's going to, again, scold that task force, I'm pretty sure. And I don't know how we're going to do it. We can't do anything in terms of reform until we have the district maps figured out, the foundation formula, and the classroom sizes, and all those sort of little nitty-gritty details that'll be coming up. But
well, and then you take the communities like Rutland. So Rutland's school board, they're looking at a 4% increase, mm-hmm. right? So if you do 4% in Rutland, But you don't, if these other schools that might do 6 or 8 or 12, at the end of the day, they're all still sharing in that load.
Right.
So our rate might still go up 6%, even though our schools only went up 4%. So while I really, really appreciate the work that the school board has put in and that Pam and her administration are doing at their superintendent's office, we still have this challenge, Brian, throughout the state. And I get the idea of an equitable education across the state. I think there's a lot of value to that. However, we can't just keep going the direction we're going. So paying down, my opinion, and this I don't share them that often on the show when it comes outside of the city, but my opinion is that paying down that tax rate only if we're going to have a plan in place.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what's the point of spending those one-time funds? Because it's just going to happen again next year, and it's just going to happen again the year after.
And that's the problem. Now, you add to that the consideration that this is an election year, and so many people of both parties, I guess there's 3, there's progressives and Democrats and Republicans, they don't want to not buy it down because then they're under the microscope with their constituents for raising their taxes. So it's going to be a very interesting and challenging year for the budget. Now, the buy down will be in what's called the BAA, the Budget Adjustment Act, where there might be some revenue that the state could use to buy that down. It won't come out of the big bill, which doesn't happen until almost the last couple days of the session. But here's the other thing in terms of budget. This was released about 2 weeks ago from the Joint Fiscal Office. And I just want to make people aware that there's 3 revenue funds in the state. There's the general fund, which is sales tax, income tax, purchase and use, all those sort of
so when I see in my paycheck, right?
Normal taxes. Right. That's the general fund. The education fund, which takes money from the lottery and other things to fund education. And then the transportation fund is the third one. And that has struggled of late because there are more people driving electric vehicles which don't use gasoline, so there's no gas tax anymore. So anyway, the general and education funds closed below their monthly targets for November. And while the transportation fund actually ended slightly above, combined, the 3 major funds were below the target for the month by $17 million or 7.5%. And year to date, and this is the important one, the 3 major funds are each below target and collectively are down about $9 million or 0.7%. So normally, the general fund is the recipient of a lot of taxes that people don't even see for the most part. The reason that happened this year, and the general fund was down by $15 million for the month of November. Year to date, it's about $4.2 million down, but much of that was driven by the corporate income tax, one of the more volatile tax types, which came in, believe it or not, 506% below the target. And that was due to significant refunding activity. So in the month of November, for instance, where corporations have made payments in excess of actual tax liability, they have the option to either roll it over and put it forward to the next one or take the money, and they took the money this time. So it's not a rosy picture.
It's not, and it shows kind of, you're looking at a lot of national trends, and sales are down in certain markets, and GDP, jobs. It's very interesting to see how we're affected. Now, I've always said Vermont, we don't have the high highs and the low lows. Mm-hmm. We tend to ebb and flow a little bit more, but we still, when the market still goes down, when things change in the country, we still dip, and we have that impact.
So if we do use the $78 million for that one-time thing, that is $78 million less that we could spend on fuel oil for people that need it, for food for people that need it, for health services, all that other stuff. So it really becomes a question of priorities and how you're going to balance everything.
That's exactly right. That's what we did in the city too. It's all about the priorities.
Yeah.
Right. Public safety is a priority. Affordability are priorities. Those are the top 2 in their city right now.
And again, by the time this show airs, the Rutland Herald called right before I left last Monday to go up to the State House and ask me for my thoughts on what was going to be major sort of issues. I said the education piece for sure. That's number one. The budget, number two. Energy costs and health care costs are both very, very problematic for people right now. And worrisome still is the public safety aspect. We have not, in my view, given the judicial system enough tools to address. I call them frequent flyers. That's probably unkind, but they're in court. It seems like once a week, and they're not. I'm not painting a picture of murderers walking around. These are people that are, it's retail theft and whatever other sort of minor transgressions. But it does add up, and it takes the police department hours to process all this stuff, and then they're back out doing the same thing again. So those are the four that I brought up, and we'll see how close I am to what the governor says in his State of the State. So
I can't believe it's January already. You guys are back up there.
Yeah.
When you said it, I had to think, holy crap, we're there.
Yeah. By the way, we had a tremendous Christmas fund this year. I haven't had a chance to mention that. We had a record-breaking year, which falls in line with what we had seen with the tire sale, the so-called Wheels for Warmth, which buys fuel for people that are desperately in need of it, and also the Stuff-A-Bus, which both set records. Never before has more money been collected for either of those two. And so the Christmas Fund joined them, and we didn't get to everybody. I wish we had. But at one point, we were really seriously worried we weren't going to get to even our most needy. And we don't make that decision, folks. Please understand. It's the agency partners that we have that give us what they see as the most needy. And then if you still have some money, here's the next group kind of thing. So, but it was really nice to be able to tell everybody that we did everything we could, and hopefully everybody enjoyed Christmas.
Wheels for Warmth, Stuff-A-Bus, Gift of Life, Christmas Fund. Those are all things, especially in Rutland, that just show the generosity of this community year over year. And so, while everyone is continuing to feel financial pressures right now, Brian, for them to understand that others are probably feeling it even harder and still give of their own, it really just makes me smile about how much this community really stands up for
Absolutely.
each other. It's amazing.
We're talking to Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges today on Catamount Community Connection. We'll take our first break, and we'll be coming back here in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program at Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, happy to have you listening, and I know people are. When I go to the VFW Post, and the mayor's with us today for their monthly breakfast, people say, hey, I just heard you on the radio. So that makes me feel good to know that at least somebody is out there listening to what we put together each week. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846, the 180th. Wow. Vermont State Fair is coming up in August. It will coincide with the 250th birthday of the country. So the fair is almost as old as the United States of America when you think about it. That's amazing.
It's going to be a good year for celebrating. We've got we're working with a team to line up different events and things on the 4th, but leading up to the 4th. And then we've got this whole group doing their fireworks fundraising, which is awesome. So I think it's going to be good. It's going to be good in Rutland.
Great. All right. So we've talked about the budget. And again, Rutland City voters on town meeting day, which, let me see if I can find it quickly on the calendar here. It looks like it might be the week of March 2nd. Seems like that's right. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, in there somewhere. You will have a chance to yay or nay the city budget, which consists of two different pieces. There's the municipal side, and Mike and I have talked about the sort of impossible not to increase some of the elements because we don't really have any control over it. I'd still love to know if healthcare costs keep going up, who in the blazes is making money?
We keep talking about
I know
this.
it.
Is it the
insurance
companies,
companies?
the
I don't
hospitals,
know.
the doctors?
I don't know.
Someone is.
I know Judy Fox pretty well, and I don't think the Rutland Regional Medical Center is rolling in dough. Somebody mentioned the other day that maybe the medical profession has a little piece of that they are now making more than they used to. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, it's 10, 12, 14% every year over and over and over again. So somebody has to be making more money every year. But anyway, that's built into the municipal side of the budget. The property tax, we can do something about. And again, the legislature will take a look at that this year and try our best to figure out the most equitable, fairest way to provide a quality education for every Vermont student and not rob our residents who are still telling me we're maxed out. We cannot take another 12% increase on the property tax. So I don't know where it's going to wind up. There's going to be a vote in the end that will not please a lot of people. If you are, for instance, in the administration of a school district, you may unfortunately have to look elsewhere for employment at some point. I don't know how else to say it. And I know that's not going to be very popular, but there are superintendents that have told me they realize this is coming and they're not going to be, surprised with it. So,
well, conversations I've had too is, there's enough teachers and administrators retiring over the next 5 to 10 years that if the consolidation does happen, there may not be a lot of cuts in people, right? And there'll be cuts in positions, but appropriately at appropriate time, right? So if we look at that consolidation and we don't refill, so let's say a superintendent retires, right? But that school gets merged with another one. That gives you one for the price of two. Let's see, you have 17 history teachers in what's the new district, and 4 of them are retiring. That's a good way to go too. So I think there is an optimistic side to even the administrators at the school saying they all see the need, right? It doesn't matter which one you talk to.
Well, they pay taxes too.
Exactly right. They all see the need and they all see the challenge that's happening with it. But I do think that, Brian, we're gonna have to make some tough choices. Yeah. Right? Small schools in rural communities that cost $2 million just to keep the building open when you're graduating 8, 12, 14 students a year. When there's a school 25 minutes down the road, you go out to other states and, while it's probably not the perfect situation, when you're bused for 45 minutes, that makes a difference and it keeps the costs down. And if you just look at the Rutland region alone, right, you have Rutland High School, you have Mill River,
we got 7,
Otter Valley, right, Fairhaven. There's a long list, and we're probably targeted and ripe for being the trial area because we don't have a lot of geographical deference, and we could totally do some of that work down here.
Yeah, we have 7 high schools in the county, and probably in an ideal world, again, please don't take offense out there when you hear this, we have students that only would fill, in a perfect world, maybe 5. And I don't think that we should, in the General Assembly, make the decision about who's going to merge and who's not. I really strongly believe that should be a local decision because then they own it and they can figure out the best way to make that happen. I'm not in favor of elementary schools changing much at all. I have a real strong feeling that we can see our elementary schools pretty much stay the same. We don't need to monkey too much with them. But the high schools, they cost more to run, and we're going to have to do something. I don't know what that is, all right? And if anybody has suggestions that's listening, a superintendent or a constituent, give me a call, and my phone number is on the legislative page. I still have a landline, and I have an answering machine, so when I get back every Friday, I listen to the 5 or 10 messages, and I always call people back. I promise if you call me, I will call you back, and we can talk about what sort of ideas you have for how we should reshape education in the state. Colin Fingan is a member of the Rutland Town School Board, and he sent me a really interesting packet of information that he came up with, which would save quite a bit of money, to be fair, and not disrupt people's lives that much, I don't think. Most of it has to do with central office kind of merging and making purchases together and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of savings that could be had. So anyway, there's our budget again. And in the city, you folks that live in Rutland City, on town meeting, you'll have a chance to vote for either up or down on your budget. Everybody will. All the towns will be doing that as well. Let's move into another topic, and this is one that I think intersects with what I call that 3-acre rule, which I think is very, very poorly put together, just my opinion. And this is the DPW stormwater. So the 3-acre rule it's not about wastewater, it's about stormwater. And if you own 3 acres or more of what is called impervious surface, in other words, the water doesn't soak into the ground, then you have to come up with a plan to take that stormwater as it falls away from your property, maybe put it in a retention pond, or I don't know where else it could go, but you're probably much more versed than I am on.
Well, so we've been having a lot of discussion. So Rutland City, our sewer system and our stormwater system, for the majority of the city, are one and the same.
Come on, yeah.
Right? So the drain outside on the street, the manhole where the water, right? That's where your sewer pipe connects to too, right? And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but I don't know if you remember the last 15 years or so, we have these things called CSOs, combined sewer overflows, right? So this is when it rains really, really hard and
overwhelms it.
Yeah, it overwhelms the system, and we have these valves, and basically you're putting sewage into the Otter Creek, right? So we try not to do that. We have systems in place to prevent that as much as possible. On the flip side, so the state of Vermont says you should separate your stormwater and your wastewater, put them in 2 different systems. It's a good idea, right? It's a pretty smart concept, so we don't have these sewer overflows. And it was really important to do that to prevent sewage from going into the stream until the 3-acre rule. The 3-acre rule now says you need to treat the water and slow it down before it goes, even if it's stormwater, before it goes into the river. So there is something that we're doing in the city. There's two pieces of it. First one is this Connor Park storage project that's going to be happening at Meadow Street Park, the combination of Meadow Street and Connor Park down on Meadow Street. So this is the one where we have the softball fields in the back, and then the church has the 2 soccer fields over the left. We are going to be putting in a 1 million gallon or so storage tank
underground
under the park. So when it's all said and done, it'll just look like a park, but underground you'll have a 1 million gallon or so storage tank, and this is to take that stormwater runoff and capture it. So if you've been downtown during one of these heavy storms in the last 20 years or so, you'll notice that we can get an inch or more water on the road. If you've been to Meadow Street when a storm is like that. And that's because the system, those big underground sewer pipes, they fill up. And there's only so many places for the water to go, so many big openings. So this will allow us to capture some of that extra water and extra runoff. And a lot of this is being funded by ARPA dollars, right? So those dollars that the federal government gave the state of Vermont, was it almost 6 years ago now, right? And this is going to be a huge thing for our community for a couple reasons. The first one is that areas that had flooded consistently during these storms will no longer be flooded. So your home values, your property values will go up. That's great. That's a big deal. We can redesignate certain flood zones and low-lying water areas. 2, it does allow us to have a stormwater treatment methodology. So we can actually, treating stormwater doesn't mean necessarily adding chemicals to it. It just means making sure you get the silt and all of the things out of it that they don't want in the stream. And I'm oversimplifying. And then the third thing for me that we're working on that I'd like to see at the next phase is, while Vermont as a whole, restricting development is really important, in the city of Rutland, we want to be the epicenter of development. We're an urban center. That's what we're for. That's the whole purpose of having a city like this, is to say, this is where we want to develop. Systems like this, putting systems like this in place, Brian, allow us to do that kind of development. So that when we do stormwater, wastewater separation, we have a way to treat that stormwater and say, no, you don't have to worry about the 3-acre rule or the half an acre rule when you work on your building, because your stormwater goes into the stormwater treatment facility, an underground storage tank, before it goes out, and we can let it out slowly into the stream. So
my question now is, because 1 million gallons sounds like, holy cow, that's a lot. Will every piece of the city be affected by that, or just down at Meadow Street in that immediate area?
Great question. According to the map with all the red and blue lines in our our city engineer's office. No, it is only a section.
Okay.
The city kind of does have a little bit of a landscape to it where there are some higher points and lower points. So some of the higher points on the northwest and northeast side can come down into that area, a lot of the downtown. And then we've got other areas that would have to go into another facility. So we've talked about doing another one of these facilities, but specifically to be able to take stormwater from 3-acre properties so that we don't have to worry about those remediation fees that the state wants to pay, right? So,
is the fair going to be able to use that million-gallon?
No, different location. Yeah, but the fair is looking at doing something very similar, right?
On its own property? Yeah, okay.
But for them, they're looking at $3 million.
Yeah,
right? So it's a lot to it, and with the changes at the federal level, my request to the state, gone back to you guys in the legislature, but also to the governor and others, is let's look at how we're implementing this again, right? Like, I understand we don't want phosphorus and nitrogen in the water. We don't want the deterioration of our streams, but is there a better way to go about this rather than just put it on the backs of a couple of large property owners? Because that's what it really comes down to.
Right.
We did this as an example. You were at the fair, right? If you were to take the map of the fair, right, just the square footage, draw a box approximately the same size. Take that box and move it a mile to the west. There's more There's more impervious surface a mile to the east, which is, Allen Street to Killington Ave, right? There's more impervious surface in that same amount of space, but because each of those properties are individually owned, they don't fit in the rule. It doesn't make sense the way they did the math. And that's the challenge that I have. And that's what I think we need to ask the state to rethink, is how they're doing the equation and how people are paying for this. Because at the end of the day, having our business owners, just because they own a large property, or our not-for-profits, just because they own a large property, being the ones to carry the load of this solution is not the right way to go.
Senator Williams has a bill that he's going to introduce that will require the Agency of Natural Resources to take another look at this whole thing. We had, I think, upwards of 700 and some odd properties on the western side of the state, because we're only talking about bodies of water that empty into Lake Champlain. We're not talking about the eastern side. We're talking about the western side. And unfortunately, when they did it, they used drones. They put a bunch of drones in the air and flew them around and made decisions about, oh, yeah, that's impervious. That looks like a parking lot. Yep, okay, that's a building. That's a roof. And in fact, some of what was characterized initially as impervious surfaces were not. So I think Senator Williams, who's on Natural Resources Committee, wants ANR, the Agency of Natural Resources, to come back in and absolutely make them walk the property and take a look at what is there and not just assume that the drone gave them accurate information. So I don't know if it'll pass. I don't know what kind of appetite the rest of the Senate has for that, but I would definitely support that, because you and I both have good relationships with the McClellans, who have property that is affected by the 3-acre rule. We mentioned the fair. The Rutland County Agriculture Society is also very much affected by this and powerless to change much of it because of the railroad that is at the north of the western side, I guess. Yeah. They can't do anything about the culvert there because that's federal property. And when you start messing around with the railroads, you lose. They have more power than anybody in the world. So unless they're with you on something, you're going to lose. And then the far eastern side of the fair, you're on Route 7. Well, how are you supposed to do anything with that? So it's only the north and south that the fair could do anything with. And I don't think it's fair for the fair to be constricted by this at all. And so I did get at least a mitigation piece of that repealed last year so that they don't have to do that. But I'm not comfortable 100% with what the fair is still going to face. So anyway, hopefully this stormwater issue, the 1 million-gallon underground storage tank, will get built. Do you have a timeline? Is that going to be a very quick thing, or
it's going to happen this summer? We're planning. The bids have gone out.
Oh, okay.
We'll be awarding them here shortly. We were supposed to do it this past Friday, but it got bumped to this coming Friday. We'll be awarding the bids to the contractor to get it done. So it should be done by the end of this summer. So we're working with our rec department to make sure that any games that have been played out on those fields that time of year are rescheduled or moved to other fields, which is good. Everybody seems to work together, and the goal is to get it turned around and be done in less than one season.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's great news. I knew that there was talk of an underground facility, but I didn't know it had coalesced so quickly into getting done.
Yeah, and when you think about a 1 million gallon underground storage tank,
Yeah.
what you're really talking about is a giant building that's buried. Like it's just
Right.
a big
Yeah.
concrete building that comes in pieces and we bury it. So it'll be interesting to see, and actually it'd be fun for people to come down and take a look as the project's going on. Keep a safe distance, obviously.
Yeah,
See
and you want to make sure it's deep enough that the fields don't fall into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll have a nice solid top.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so that's the DPW stormwater issue. And by the way, I got such great respect for the DPW folks. They just are so good.
Absolutely amazing. We are blessed in this city with some, just across the board, all of the departments,
Yeah.
with people that actually care and do really great work, and DPW is on the top of
Yeah,
the list.
absolutely. Some of what has happened at the local Rutland City Police Department is unfortunate. There's no way around that. I think I can use that adjective and not cast aspersions anywhere. It's just unfortunate the way things happen. So there have been changes, and there will be other changes, I'm sure. Brian Collamore, the chief, has announced that he will retire. I think it's effective pretty
The last
soon.
day of February.
Okay.
Yep.
So another 6, 7, 8 weeks, something like that. Matt Prouty, who, again, I can't imagine a better person coming in behind him to run the show. Got a great amount of respect for Matt, and former commander of, he was Project Vision's
Yep.
visionary,
Yep.
to kind of put two words together. And so he's going to run the show for a while. But I kind of asked him the other day, you and I were at that breakfast, I wanted to know whether he had any desire to become the permanent chief, and he didn't commit one way or another. So I don't know how that's going to go.
So yeah, like you said, Commander Prouty. Now we were in a meeting this morning. I got to relearn, right? Call him Chief Prouty.
Yep.
But Chief Prouty is now in charge, and he's my main concern when the transition happened is that we had a cohesive transition. Like it was smooth, that the department could continue to operate, and that we had leadership in place that could kind of pick up the ball with Chief's retirement. And that happened. Matt was right on top of it, took the ball and ran with it, even continued working from his family. If he took a few days off and he was working while he was on vacation with his family. So we really appreciated him stepping up and doing that. And now it is about what's next. So the police commissions, they have an additional meeting on the 6th, which is tonight, right? So they have an additional meeting. Normally they meet the second Monday of every month, but this month they're meeting a few extra times, just to make sure that they're giving the department the resources that they need to keep moving forward. And a lot of these changes, the department's prepared for it anyway because they're set up for it. So I feel confident that the staff and the team at RCPD is going to continue doing a great job. There hasn't been any gaps in service, and just a little bit of change in leadership, and Matt's going to take over and run with that. I think. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I really liked Brian Collamore. I thought he did a great job, and I was so disappointed with the way things developed. The other Brady letter that it's public knowledge now is Emilio Rosario, and I thought, gosh, and I gave him all kinds of props on this show for being the kind of law enforcement officer that we need. And I'm not changing necessarily my opinion of him about this, but it just, again, it's not a good thing to have happen.
No, so like you said, both individuals. Brian did great work. He was the leader of the department for 10 years, to the point that his contract he got an additional 2 years on his contract. And Emilio is a face that everybody in town knows, and he's super friendly, and he's a fantastic person. Like when you had a concern, you could call him, and he would address it. And the trouble with situations like this is it goes beyond that, right? police officers in the department are held to a very, very, very high standard.
Right.
They essentially themselves are considered, they're like a level of evidence. Their word is a bond, and so in these situations, while you can have a great career and do great things, the specificity of what you say and how you do it and the things you do are really important to these processes, and that's why in this situation it was in two different states attorneys too, right?
Yep.
So Emilio's was back when Rose was in charge, and now
Ian
is under Ian. I think it shows that being a police officer is a tough job, and you have these requirements that most other citizens don't have. And while these two particular incidents are very difficult, I think what you'll find is that they don't negate the good work that was done by
absolutely not.
In the past,
yeah. So how many are there? 7 members of the police commission?
So there's 5.
Oh, 5. Okay.
So there's a chair and then 4.
And I happen to know 2 of them.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Maybe I know them all. I don't know. It's not one of those entities that get a lot of recognition, so I don't know.
Yeah, they don't have.
That's
a lot
probably
of
a good idea.
Yeah. So your police commissioners in Rutland City are Peg Flory, Tony Romeo, Luther Brown, Elise Headlam, and Pat Roman. And
Okay.
Pat's the chair.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And obviously, they've got some decisions to make down the road here. This show will air, by the way, on the 11th, so happy Sunday, everybody. But they're going to be meeting, I have to say this.
Last Monday.
Yeah, the last Monday. So I don't know what might have come out of that. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's a continuing kind of search. And I know there was some concern, not by me, but some other folks felt that maybe the youngness of the department was, while it's a good thing to always have that next generation coming up, at some point, when I came to town, and I'm talking, geez, I've been here a long time. Emmett Fleming, Gene Rusille, those were the beat cops. George Packard. So Bucko Barrett was on the police force for a while.
Yeah, I have a different list of names from when I was in high school.
Yeah, so okay,
yours, right? So,
yeah,
right? But so John Tupko was there.
Yeah,
you had Kevin Belangi, who works for the city still a little bit, and there's some guys with some slightly gray hair that worked at the department, and now it is a very youthful department.
Yep.
We did just hire an officer from Connecticut. He's getting certified in Vermont and field training right now. He's got some experience, so we're trying to find that mix. We brought a few officers on from the Brandon area recently, came to work for the city. So while we do have a youthful department, a lot of that's in spirit too, because we do have some guys with experience, which is great. Guys and gals with experience, which is great, and we'd like to carry that forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like having that institutional knowledge and being a resource for a brand new officer from someone that spent 30, 40 years doing the job very well, and is able to provide counsel to somebody coming in and, no, you don't do it that way. Let me show you again. This is the way we do it. This is the right way to do it. And all those guys that I mentioned were like that. I'll never forget, I probably shouldn't tell school stories out of school. Back in the old days, there was a Rutland Shopping Plaza, which had a flat roof. And I believe there was a Vermont National Bank branch right toward, not as far down as Firestone was, but back up a little bit. And there was a young lad who was being a pest, and he was up on the roof, and he was yelling and hollering and screaming, and people were, and Officer Packard showed up, and he said, "Would you please come down?" And there was some obscenity from the young lad, and said, "You come up here and get me." And by golly,
sure enough, he did.
I couldn't believe it. He absolutely shimmied up the pole and grabbed the guy and took him away.
There you go.
I'll never forget that. He was a great, great public servant. So,
for a city of our size, 16,000 people, we're still very much a small town.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the type of personal interaction you get with our department, good and bad. Right.
Right.
Right. But, even to the point where you're having the conversation this morning, like we had a lot of troubles at the transit center. The police doubled up their efforts, and they're down there, and things are in great shape now, and we're going to continue to patrol that. We had a bunch of business owners reach out in the past few months saying, "Hey, listen, we know that things are happening, but you need to double your efforts. This is affecting the way we operate." And it's nice to hear from them too, and it's nice to have their weight behind when we go and ask for stuff, especially from the state. And the police department stepped up, and they're doing extra patrols, and they're on foot, even in this cold weather, and they're being seen and present, and it makes a difference. And that's what I think, when, especially through, not to go back to the budget, but you saw it in this budget process, people came out to support the PD.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in every community.
No.
In some communities, their police department's a curse word.
Burlington.
Yeah. In Rutland, though, regardless, everybody.
We back the blue. Yeah.
So.
All right, we need to take our second break. We're talking with Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and we have about 8 minutes left in the show, so we'll come back with our final thoughts in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs show. And I'm Brian Collamore, delighted that you are listening this morning or this evening, depending on what station you're listening to.
Or watching on Peg TV.
Or what? Yeah, well, there's nothing to watch. It's just sort of a bunch of squiggly lines, but my picture's up on it, yeah. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. The 180th Vermont State Fair is coming up in August, and it will dovetail rather nicely with the 250th birthday of the United States of America. So we talked about a number of the issues facing the city, and I always try to leave at least 5, 6, 7 minutes for the guests to talk about anything else that I haven't brought up that they want to talk. We talked about the legislation that I want to do with respect to that 3-acre rule, but I know from public safety there's something that I believe Representative McGuire might be doing, right?
Yeah, so I had kicked this idea around with the Rutland delegation. It's interesting. I have an IT background, 20-something years.
Yep.
So you sit down, you evaluate the different symptoms that you see. You say, okay, what's the root cause? What's the real problem that's causing all these symptoms to happen? And when you look at crime in Rutland, almost over 80% of the petty crimes and other crimes in Rutland are all based on substance use issues. So having that conversation, looking at the repeat offenders, like we were talking about earlier in the show, looking at accountability, trying to find why drug sales in Rutland, why it seems so easy for these drug dealers to do drugs. What I found is in the state of Vermont, along with myself, Ian Sullivan, Tom Burdett, the discussions that you and I have had, Brian, that in the state of Vermont, there are no sentencing minimums or guidelines, as they're called, for the sale of heroin, xylazine, fentanyl, or the like. So let's put it this way. If you are a drug dealer and you are selling heroin and you are caught, the judge could give you a day and $20 fine, or they could give you a year. There's no guidelines for the judges. Now, there are maximums, and they're really big maximums. You could go to prison for 10 years, right? You could pay millions of dollars in fines, depending. But there are no minimums. So let me give you a corollary. When you are caught driving under the influence of alcohol, there is a minimum. And then, if you're caught again, there's another one. They're called escalating, right? They go up. And then the third time it gets higher. We don't even have that for selling heroin. We don't have anything like that. So this is a very basic bill, very basic piece of legislation that puts in minimum sentencing guidelines that says, and Ian Sullivan, our state's attorney, is working on this. Eric McGuire is going to help me introduce it at the state level with you guys. And I know Rutland supports this for the most part. But basically giving these judges guidelines saying you have to put, maybe the first time it's, someone new and they're just trying to get by and they make a bad decision and they sell a drug they shouldn't be selling. Okay? Maybe that's a 30-day sentence. But by the third time you've done this, or the second time you've done this, you're not listening, right? We don't want you selling these highly illegal, lethal drugs in our community, period, end of sentence. So this escalating minimum, just like a DUI, would step up the minimum. So the first time it starts here, next time it gets a little bit more severe, third time it's super severe, right? And what those severities are, the legislature is going to have to decide. I made some recommendations of 30 days, 6 months, 4 years in prison, things like that. But that type of bill does so many different things. One, it holds those acting, because they're not pharmacists and they're not selling drugs that you can even buy in a pharmacy, so they're illegally selling illegal substances, right? So that holds you accountable for that. That's step one. Step two, it does give the police and the state's attorney leverage to make deals, right? If you watched any TV about catching drug dealers, they always want the big guy, right? They want the guy that's selling the little guy the drugs. Well, they can't do that in this state because there's no sentencing minimum, so there's no threat of anything. So now they can make a deal with these guys and say, hey, listen, this is your third offense. Give us a name or you're getting, X amount of years. And then the third thing it does is it sets a tone. So if anybody who's listening has ever had a kid, you know that if you put a guideline in place and then you enforce that guideline, they're not going to push that boundary more than 2 or 3 times, and then they're not going to want to do it anymore.
Right.
We need to have a boundary, Brian. And a maximum doesn't give us a boundary, especially when it's a citation after you do that. You get caught 4 times and you get 4 citations. That's not a boundary. So this is a real accountability level bill. It's not targeting anyone that isn't doing something highly illegal, and it is not. And the reason that at least in the suggestion built in these escalating sentences is because in Vermont we don't like those guideline minimums, but having escalating minimums really does give people the opportunity to make a good choice after they screw up the first time. And so that, I think, it's a pretty well structured solution to help us with a lot of those symptoms in the community. And so what I'm looking for, and the reason I'm taking the time to talk about it, is I'd love the support of the community as a whole behind this, to call you guys and say, hey, if this gets on the board, to make sure it comes down and they have the discussion.
Okay. I just have maybe a couple things and I'm pondering here. Marijuana, we're in a really strange situation because in Vermont, that is now legal.
Right.
So I'm assuming that if you're selling marijuana, you're not involved with this.
This only touches fentanyl, xylazine, and heroin.
Not cocaine?
That's it. Not cocaine.
Okay.
Fentanyl, xylazine, and heroin, and what would be called their synthetics, right? So that's the only three drugs the bill touches.
Okay. The second thing, and it's just sort of, I don't know, due diligence, if you will. I have great respect for separation of powers. So the judiciary could they're in a very tough position. They can't come in and testify whether this is a good one or a bad one, but you could get sort of an indication from our local judges or statewide if you wanted to talk to the head judge of the state as to whether, because whenever you give someone a tool, what you hope will happen is that they can use it and it works. If you give them a lousy tool, it isn't going to be any good.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is a thoughtful tool, right?
Yeah,
I'm hoping this is a good tool. And, one step away from the judge is the state's attorneys, right? So those state's attorneys can come in and they're
fine. They could testify.
So they could testify.
Yep.
And I think, again, why I try to run this, I'm not the expert in these things. This came out of 25, 30 conversations with the experts in the community and just seeing that giant gap in our ability to enforce these drug laws in a way that was significant enough that people would feel the pain of doing the illegal thing. And I do hope this is the right tool, but we're got to be careful about putting it in.
Yeah. And obviously we still have issues. Once the interstates went in, I think, 91 and 89, life in Vermont changed drastically. Some would argue for the better. Some would argue the good old days were the good old days and they miss them. But 91 especially seems to be one of those direct paths from places like Springfield, Mass. I hate to use that city, but it's a pretty good example.
Well, historically, Rutland's had trouble with people coming in from Springfield and bringing drugs now, but we see it from everywhere, though. Yeah. It's not just, we see people flying in with stuff now. Yeah. We see people, it's coming from New York, it's coming from Connecticut, but we don't produce those things in Vermont for the most part. There are other drugs produced in Vermont, right, that might be leaving the state, but those drugs are definitely coming in from other places, but the country has the same problem, right? Yeah. How much heroin and fentanyl is coming from China? A lot. So it's a challenging situation. It directly affects our community. It is 80% of the petty crimes in Rutland, Vermont are related to substance use.
Yeah.
And so if we can start to, bottleneck it at the substance use place, whether that's through treatment, we spent tons of time working on treatment, getting treatment components in place. They're working at the state level to do treatment and incarceration in a different way than they've done it before. And now we also have to stop the sale of these illegal drugs.
So we got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I want to thank you, first of all, for coming in. It's always good to talk to you. It'll be a different sort of landscape for me now that the legislature's in session. I can only do this recording on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday because the rest of the time I'm up. I stay up in Montpelier during the week. But it's always good to be able to get caught up. And I don't know if you had any last-minute thoughts about anything.
With the budget done and us moving into election season here, one of the things that we're going to be doing at the city level is working on the capital improvement plan, which is a plan that we're doing every year now with monies that don't come from the property tax. So we have the 1% sales tax revenue and other revenue sources. So we're working through that right now. And that'll be out there for the board to vote on probably the second meeting in January. So it's just a prioritization of projects in the city. And I'd love to get citizen feedback on it. So as we present those to the board, if people can come in and share their feelings on whether they want the culvert on their street replaced or, what are the things that are affecting the community. These are capital projects. These are things that are going to help us. Can you imagine fixing a boiler on a city building without having to go to the taxpayers? That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's the first time we've been able to do that in the history of the city because we didn't have a plan like this 2 years ago. So I'm excited about that. That's what we'll work through now in the next 4 weeks. So when I come back, hopefully I can tell you it's been successful.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come in on a Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, okay. And again, we're going to see some movement downtown soon, the remediation, and then I can't wait for the first shovel to go in and see that hotel start to build. I think that's going to be very exciting.
It'll be a great day.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we've been talking to Mike Doenges, the mayor of the city of Rutland. And again, I appreciate him coming in. I appreciate you listening. And we will see all of you next week on Catamount Community Connection.